So I got this question that says, is there a quick way to reallocate expenses to multiple classes or jobs at the end of the period, even if I didn't specifically assign a class or job to all those expenses? Okay, so this is a really good question. It's a little bit complex. There's a lot of moving parts, but it's a perfect opportunity for me to teach you one, journal entries that don't affect your accounting, that they just redistribute expenses across multiple classes or jobs, and two, a concept called a zero net check, which is actually an alternative to journal entries that uses an item instead of an account in order to make the adjustment. Bear with me. I guarantee you at the end, you're going to learn a lot in this video. It seems like an advanced topic. It is an advanced topic, but trust me, you're going to get a lot out of it. So let's start with setting this up just to make sure that we understand the nature of the question. I'm going to go into the reports menu, click on profit and loss standard, and then I'm going to pull up a profit and loss for the whole year, for example. So let's say you were doing this for the month or for the year, any period really. And then I'm going to group or show columns by class. And just to kind of simplify the visuals here, I'm going to collapse the columns and the rows just to have just a cleaner version of the profit and loss. Notice I got one class here called new construction, one called remodel, one called government, and one called unclassified. So the nature of the original question, from what I understand, is if there are any expenses here under unclassified, like for example, this depreciation expense or this rent, is there a quick way for me to take and spread that across the active classes? So essentially you don't have anything under that unclassified column. So I think that's the nature of the question. So I'm going to show you that in two approaches. One, we're going to do a journal entry, and two, we're going to do a zero net check afterwards. You can fast forward to the zero net check if you want to. Let's start with the journal entry. I'm going to make this report a little bit smaller, and I'm going to kind of just toss it to the side here just so we can kind of see in real time what's going on while we make the adjustment. And I'll collapse this left navigation bar, put this towards the right. So I'm going to run a journal entry. I'm going to go to company, make journal entry. And essentially what we're going to do is we're going to take this unclassified expenses, these two here, depreciation and rent, and we're going to spread them across the classes. So we'll start with depreciation, a really simple one. So I'm going to start in my journal entry. The very first thing I'm going to do is pick the date. So let's say this is going to be the end of the year. So 12/31/2020. Entry number, I'm just going to call it allocation. That really doesn't matter what you put in there. And then the first account that we're going to use, it's going to be the account that we want to reclassify or reallocate, really. So we're going to start with depreciation expense, and then we're going to credit that, because that's how you remove expenses. That's how you reduce expenses. That same dollar amount that's here, $44,435. So put here $44,435.91. Perfect. So that's the credit. Then we're going to debit the exact same account, because again, this journal entry is not going to affect my net. If you look at the net income for the year, that's 167. We're not going to touch the net income. That's going to stay consistently. What we're going to essentially do is change the net income across the multiple classes. So we're going to put here depreciation expense, and we're going to copy this account. We're going to copy it to 3 lines. So we're going to paste it twice here. So I'm going to have depreciation expense 1, 2, 3, and then on each of that line second to the fourth one, leaving the first line blank because we're moving it from unclassified. So from no class, we're going to move it into each of the classes. So we'll go into new construction, remodel, and then government. So we're going from no class into new construction, remodel, and government. And then we're going to split it accordingly. So if this is supposed to be a third each, we just literally just divide this number by 3, right? And let's try that again. Divide that by 3, and we get 14,881.97. We're going to copy that on the next line, and then copy that on the next line. Let's see if there's any differences. Okay, that works perfectly. So, and there might be some times where the number doesn't allow you to split evenly in 3. Like for example, I'm just going to change that to a 0, and then show you that then later on, in order to get this split off, I might have to change one of the numbers here just by a cent or so. Right, so just something to keep in mind if you don't get a perfect sort of division at the end, right? So it's pretty simple stuff. So now what I'm taking is I'm taking the 44,000, taking it out of depreciation expense with no class, so reducing it from unclassified, and then splitting it a third, a third, and a third. So I'm going to go ahead and click on save. And then we're going to go into the profit and loss. And then notice that I no longer have anything under unclassified. That is now being shifted into the other classes. That's actually pretty simple to see. That's how it works. Let's say, for example, that we were going to do the same thing, but to move it from one specific class. So let's say I want to move all these automobile expenses that are under the government class, and I want to move that, let's say, across new construction and remodel, and I don't want to leave anything behind in the government class. So we'll do the same thing. We'll do 12/31/2020. We start with the automobile expense. So automobile expense, we credit that same dollar amount, 7115.24, 7115.24, and then we debit the split. Okay, so let's say we're going to do a 60/40. So we'll do the first one, multiply that times 0.6. So I'm just multiplying the number times 0.6 to get 60%. And then the balance here, in this case, if it's just one line left, it will automatically calculate for me. That second line is 40% of the 7,000. So I'll put the automobile, and then we'll go from the government class into then new construction and remodel. Okay, so notice that I didn't leave the class empty this time. I actually picked a specific class because I'm moving it from one class to the other. So I'm going to hit and save. And before I hit save, just pay attention to the numbers here where it says automobile. Pay attention to those numbers when I hit save. So save. Okay, and then notice that the classes were now reallocated across the other classes. So that's a simple journal entry method. Again, if you look at the net income, that's still 167,000. I haven't changed or modified my net income. Essentially, these journal entries are just internal adjustments across classes or jobs. So that was the example for classes. Let's do an examples with a job. So I'm going to do just this month in this case. I'm going to do this month here. And then I'm going to do show columns instead of by classes. I'm going to do by customer job. And because there's so many customers and jobs, I'm just going to make sure that my columns are all expanded. Okay, perfect. Let me expand this a little bit here. So you see that we got one job here called, or one customer called Bolinsky, and then another job called Lamb, another job called Nelson, and then an actual job called overhead. This is actually a perfect example to use. So let's say we want to shift over the overhead expenses across the jobs. So we're going to do the same principle here. Let me move the report here. And then we're going to do, let's say, end of November, so 11/30/2020. And then we're going to move, let's start with automobile expense. We're going to credit that 383.00. Then we're going to go to automobile expense again, and we'll delete that number. Automobile expense again, delete that number. Automobile expense again, and delete that number. Perfect. So let's divide that evenly. Let's just do 383 divided by 3. So 383 divided by 3, that's 127.67. I'll just copy and paste those numbers down. Look, I'm off by a cent in this case, so I'll just add 2 cents. Actually, I'll take away one of the cents from one of them, and then I get an even number. It's a good example there. We had to kind of clean up the last one, take a cent or so to make the numbers match. And then we're going to go from the customer name overhead. So we got a customer name overhead, and then we're going to move that into Bolansky, and then Lamb. Perfect. And then Nelson. Perfect. And what I'll do is I'll get rid of these billable check marks just because I don't like dealing with billables. In this case, it would be irrelevant anyway. So that's essentially what we're doing, right? We're moving automobile expense from one customer across multiple customers. And then once we hit save, pay attention to these numbers over here. We'll click on save. And there we go. Voila. Really simple. So that's the journal entry method. You saw classes and customer jobs. And we're going to do one more, which is a zero net check. And this is the part where the question asks if there's a quick way to do it. Obviously, these journal entries are not that quick, but they're also not that slow. So, I mean, it's not really that difficult to do this. Just do your calculations. You can memorize this journal entry and duplicate it. So there's ways that you could do this a little bit faster. But I'm going to show you how to do this with a zero net check because it's really an interesting concept anyway. So I'm going to close the journal entry. I'm going to make this report a little bit tighter here. And let's do the same thing with insurance. So we're going to move the 823.83 from insurance overhead into multiple jobs, or we're going to do that with a check instead. So I'm going to go into banking, click on write checks. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the accounts in the check itself to do that. So I'm going to go into insurance, and then we're going to take the expense away. So it's going to be a negative number. So I'm going to do negative 823.83, and then that's going to be customer job overhead in this case. It works the same way with classes if you want to use classes instead, but right now we're using customer jobs. And then we're going to come in here and do insurance, another line, insurance, another line, insurance, and then we'll split off the 823.83 divided by 3, and then 823.83 divided by 3, and then the last number, 274.61. Perfect. The idea is that the check itself is a net zero. That's why it's called a zero net check. And then here, notice that the expenses are zeroed out in this specific case because, again, we're not going to change the net income across the jobs. I'm actually going to expand this a little bit because when I hit save, I want you to notice how that 823 will now get shifted around. So, so let's put that into Bolinsky, and then the next job was Lamb, and the next job was Nelson. Okay, so again, we can leave the billable check normally. I would do unchecked. I'm going to hit save. Before I hit save, just pay attention to the insurance numbers. Then I'm going to hit save, and there you go. That's an even reallocation of those expenses across the board. Now, here's the trickiest and the most advanced one, the one that's going to be quite satisfying, which is, what if I have to do this every month and it's always the same percentage of allocation? So just to simplify, I'm going to go here to last month and I'm going to do it by class instead. Okay. And let's assume for a second that this class here called government, let me close that. This class called government is actually a class called overhead. So I'm going to change that for a second just to kind of show you the concept. So I'm going to change this one to overhead. And let's say that all month long we were booking expenses to this overhead class. And we want to move this across new construction and remodel, but it's always 70-30. And I don't want to sit there and do a calculation each time. So is there a quicker way to do that? So I'm going to show you what that way is. There's going to be multiple moving parts. Just bear with me. We'll figure this out. First, I'm going to go into the item list and click on item list. Yes, we're going to the item list, not the account list. I'm going to create a new item. And I'm going to call this, I'm going to make this a service item. I'm going to click on this little checkbox that says this service is used in assemblies or performed by a subcontractor or partner. You have to check that. And then I'm going to use as the expense account automobile. Okay. Now on the sales part or in the income part, I'm also going to enter automobile. It doesn't matter because I'm not going to be using this item in a invoice, but let's do it anyway. And then for cost, you're going to put $1. Trust me on this. Cost is $1. Now on the item name, I'm going to call it automobile allocation. So automobile allocation. I'm calling the item automobile allocation, and then I'm going to go ahead and click on OK. Okay, so there's my item. Then I'm going to create another item. I'm going to go to new item, and I'm going to make this a group now. Now this group, I'm going to call it reallocation auto. So that's what I'm calling it, reallocation. Auto is the name of the group. And then for item, I'm going to enter the item 3 times. So I'm going to do auto allocation once. Let me expand that so you can see that. Automobile reallocation twice. And then automobile reallocation 3 times. And then for quantities, I'm going to do -1 for one of the lines. Then I'm going to put here 0.70 and then 0.3. So basically the sum of this between the -1, the 0.70, and the 0.3, the sum of that would all be 0. And what this is going to do, this is going to make just mathematical calculations in our behalf. Then I'm going to go ahead and click on OK. And there's my group item set up and my service item set up. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to banking and click on write checks. Okay. And then what I'll also do is pay in the order of. I'm going to create a vendor called Reallocation 0 Net Check. So I'm creating a vendor called Reallocation 0 Net Check, sort of on purpose so we kind of know what's going on. Okay. I'm going to make this check number 0 or no check number for that matter. And doesn't matter the date in this case. And then I'm going to go here where it says items. And I'm going to select my reallocation group. This is the group I created that contains, it's a group, notice that contains all the items. I notice that my 3 automobile allocations automatically get entered with the quantities in there. Now, in addition to that, as I mentioned earlier, because let's say this is a common thing that we do once a month, we're going to go ahead and enter the classes here in the way that we want to reallocate it. So if we want to remove the expense away from overhead, we're going to make that the first class. So we'll do overhead. And then let's do the other 2. So it'll be new construction for the 70%. And then remodel for the 30%. So we got it right there, right? Okay. So, and then what we're going to do at this point is here where it says quantity, we're just going to start with a 1, just with a plain 1. And notice that this is just moving the 1 around across the board. And then down here in the description, this will be the very last line under the last item. I'm just going to write the description there so the user, the QuickBooks user, knows what they're supposed to do. So I'm going to put here replace number 1 under quantity of the first line with the total dollar amount to be reallocated. So I'm just basically writing instructions, per se. Okay, so we got here replace number 1 under quantity for the first line for the amount to be reallocated, and we'll put here do not touch, and we'll copy that. Do not touch and do not touch. So we're not going to touch any of the first 3 lines. That's all set in stone. All I'm going to do essentially is recall this transaction and replace this 1 with the whatever number we are reallocating. So this 1091.56 would be the number. So at this point, I'm just going to leave it like this. And then I'm going to memorize this transaction by clicking Control M on the keyboard. Control M, which is to save the transaction. And then I'm going to do not remind me. And then we're going to do reallocation 0 net check. And in parentheses, I'll put auto or reallocation. Let's just do auto like that. So reallocation auto is the name of this transaction. So this now has been saved as a template. Now I can close the check and hit no because I'm not saving anything. At this point, nothing has happened yet. You can see the report. All my auto is still sitting there under overhead. We haven't saved or executed the transaction yet. Let's go ahead and do that. So let's go into the list menu and let's go to memorize transaction list. And then let me expand this a little bit. And then here's my reallocation auto. That's all set up, ready to go. All I got to do is double click on that. And then my check gets created. I pick the date. So this is going to be October, right? Because we're looking at the October report, right? So this will be for the October one. So I'm going to go ahead and put October 31st, 2020. And then I'm going to read the instructions. It says replace the one with the number quantity. So this is the one that I'm going to replace, the positive one. I'm going to replace that with 1091.56. So 1091.56, hit tab, and QuickBooks, because of the formulas, will make all that recalculation, that 30-70 split. It will do that recalculation for me. It did it all automatically just by changing that quantity. And again, you have to follow the instructions to the teeth. Then I'm going to go ahead and click on save. And before I hit save, pay attention to this part here, automobile expense, and then click on save. Okay, and that's it. It did it. It did a 70-30 split for that expense. So let's say, for example, you needed to do that for 10 expense accounts every month or every year or every quarter or whatever. You're going to have to create a group item for each one of them and enter each of the group items in the zero net check. This will just be a really long check per se. That's going to contain a whole bunch of moving parts, and that's it. Or you can enter it right there inside the same group if you wanted to. And that's essentially it. Pretty simple stuff. Journal entry, zero net check. Now I'm going to take this to a whole new level of complicated, but complicated in a good way, for people that maybe are doing this very often and they want to find a more semi-automated way to do this in Excel first, to make some calculations and then push it as a journal entry. So I'm going to show you this technique, this very unique technique. It's going to require for you to have a macro. I sell the macro, so I'll show you about that a little bit later. And then I'm going to take you to the process so you can see how this works. And again, even if you don't need this, I think it will be very interesting to kind of see this process. So I'm going to go back into QuickBooks here, and then I'm going to take the profit and loss report that we have, because we want to reallocate everything here under overhead, essentially. We're going to take this profit and loss report here, and we're going to export it into Excel. So we'll export this into Excel over here. And then I don't need any of the totals. So I'm gonna get rid of the totals. But first, I'm gonna use this report. Let me maximize this, and then maybe zoom in the text a little more so it's easier to read. Okay, and let's say I'm gonna use this to figure out how to allocate, like what percentages. So what I'll do is just make a simple formula here. I'm gonna just insert a line over here, and then I'll do equals one of the classes, and I'll divide that by the total. And then I'm just gonna, here in the formula, just insert a $sign next to the J and the 6, just so it doesn't shift over while I push and copy the formula over. Hit enter. So that gives me 22% essentially, right? Actually, I should do it not of this total. I should do it of the these two together, because overhead will essentially be 0. So that was my mistake. So let me get rid of that. And then divide that by the sum of these two together. That's how we should do it. So the sum of these two together, and also we'll put the famous $signs in there, just so it doesn't shift over as I copy the formula over. So now we got 35%. So let's go into data here, or actually home, and make this a percentage. And if we want it to be more precise, 35.11%. So same thing, I'm going to copy this formula over, and then we get 64.89%. So these are going to be the exact percentages that we're going to use. We'll get back to that in a minute. I'm just going to copy these percentages, and I'm going to paste them over here as values, just so we have them in there. We'll deal with that stuff later. So now let's delete these two columns here. We don't need them. And then just leave the overhead. Delete that. Okay, we don't need that. And then we're going to delete the total. We don't need that. Delete the headers. Delete that. And then come down here. Delete all this. Perfect. And then we don't need this. Delete it. And we don't need the totals. Perfect. So now we have essentially just the accounts. Now this account here is a little bit off. So I'm going to cut that and paste it on the next column, so they're all essentially in the same column. And then I'm going to just highlight, just so I know that these are the income ones, just because income has a kind of the inverse treatment as an expense or a cost of goods sold. So I'm just going to highlight the income ones, just so I remember which ones are going to have special treatment. So I'm going to delete everything else in here, and then delete everything else we have in there. Okay, perfect. So this is the first piece of information that we needed, which is we needed to know exactly how much we are going to be adjusting in this case. So I'm going to take this same information. I'm going to take my list of accounts. I'm going to copy them, and then I'm going to paste them without any numbers. Okay, and then I'm going to paste them one more time. Okay, perfect. So I basically pasted them 2 more times to make up for the class allocation that we're going to do. Then I'm going to select the 2 columns here, so the 2 columns, and then I'm going to sort by data. I'm going to click on sort, and I'm just going to sort by column A in this case. So sort by column A, and then click on OK. And then basically what you're going to see is you're going to see the accounts kind of double, and then you're going to see the 2 spaces come right under, and that's fine. We want that. Okay, that's what we want. Okay, next we want to do is put our classes. So let's do here classes, and here, and then the first class will be overhead. Okay, and then I think we deleted that percentage, but we'll put the percentage back in there. And then the other one was let's just go back into QuickBooks. It was new construction and remodel. Okay, so we're going to do new construction, and then we're going to do remodel. Okay, then we're going to go with our allocation. So we're going to do allocation. Okay, and essentially what we're going to do is we are going to debit, in this case, we're going to debit overhead. We're going to debit construction income because we want to get rid of it and move it somewhere else. So then a debit is usually a positive number. So we're going to do a 1. And then a new construction, in this case, we're going to credit it. So we'll do negative 0.3511, which I believe was the allocation for one of the classes. And then the other one's going to be negative 0.6889. Okay, so these 3 together should add up to 0. Let me just it was 64.89, I believe, 64.89. Okay, so these here should sum to 0 because that's going to give me an exact math, and that's exactly what we want. Okay, so this is the allocation for income accounts. I'm going to copy and paste that for the other income accounts. I'm going to come here and copy and paste that for the income accounts. And then for the expense accounts will be similar, just inverse polarity. So I'm going to copy and paste one of them here, but instead I'm going to make this -1. Whoops. So we'll do this -1, and then the next one's -1, sorry. And then we'll get rid of the negative sign on this one, and then get rid of the negative sign on that one. Okay, and then we're just going to copy and paste this down. Okay, we'll keep going. Copy and paste, copy and paste. Okay, perfect. That will do. And then for these empty spaces here, all we're going to do is just fill them up by clicking on selecting the entire column and hitting Control G on the keyboard. And then we'll click on Special, and then we'll do blanks, hit OK. So only the blanks are selected. And then on the formula bar, I'm going to hit equals and just select the number right on top of where this formula is. So I'll select this one and hit Control Enter. Okay, that's going to basically copy the number only under the blanks. Then I'm going to take the classes here. I'm just going to copy these down. Okay, just copy these down so they're going to cycle correctly. And then right here in the new column, I'm just going to do a formula. So I'm going to do equals. In this case, I'm going to take the amount times the allocation, then hit enter, and then just bring that down. Okay, what I should do though, let me go back for a second, is I should be rounding these. So let's do round. Okay, and then we round it by 2 digits. Okay, so that's actually an important formula here that we have to do. We have to actually do the rounding, and then we'll bring that down. Okay, perfect. So that should work. We'll select the total amount here. It says the sum here is 3. Okay, so that's going to give me a little bit of a math problem because of the allocation. So all I'm going to do in this case is I'm going to just take the last number here and reduce it by 3 cents. So let me copy and paste values, and we'll take the very last one. 3 cents. Let's see. Oh, whoops. It was supposed to add 3 cents. So we'll do 6 and then 9. Sorry. Then select all. Okay, all these should be. Oh, actually, that didn't work. What happened? Let me do undo. Undo. Okay, that should work. Undo one more time. Select all. Sum of 3 cents. Okay, so let's take negative 182 point. What was it? 39. So negative 182.39. Negative 182.39. Enter. Okay, let me copy and paste values. Copy and paste values here, and see if I get all this stuff should add up to 0 actually. Well, let's give it a shot. Let's see what happens. So let's do a auto sum here. Press enter. Okay, I'm not sure why that's not working, but that should be a net to 0. I don't know why the calculation is not working. It's actually not important. Okay, so now I got essentially what all the numbers should look like. I'm gonna copy this and paste values. Then at this point, I don't need allocation and I don't need overhead. Essentially, all I needed was my accounts, my classes, and the numbers. Okay, so I'm gonna open up my macro. This is the part where I said you might need to purchase my macro here. And this is basically a file that can take sort of an Excel spreadsheet and convert it into a importable journal entry file. So I'm going to clear this out. Hit clear. And this journal entry is supposed to be for December. So let's go back into my macro here. And we'll do here December. So 12/31/2020. Reference number, let's just do reference number 1. And then we're going to put here the account, the amount, and the class. So now we're going to go back to our crazy spreadsheet here. And then let's start with the accounts. Now in QuickBooks, you either do account numbers or you do account names, not both. So just for the heck of it, we're going to do account numbers in this case. So I'm just going to delete all the account names here. So what I'll do is I'll take this information here, hit copy, select the whole column, Control F, click on replace, paste that, and then just put an asterisk there. That's just a little trick to replace everything in front of the number, and then hit close. So now I got just the account numbers, again account numbers or account names. So then I'll take all the account numbers here, copy them, put them into my macro. Perfect. And then we're going to go into the next one, which is the dollar amounts. Take all the dollar amounts here, copy them, and let's go into my macro, and we'll paste the values here. Paste special. Whoops, that didn't work. Okay, well, I guess that worked. Okay, there we go. And let's just do dollar values here. Let's see. Yeah, this sums up to 0. Just wanted to double check that the sum was 0, because otherwise it wouldn't balance. And then we got the classes now. So let's go here and let's copy all the classes. I know this is pretty insane stuff, but sometimes when I got to do like 50 accounts, I want to do a spreadsheet. I don't want to sit there and enter all the transactions manually. And then we're going to paste that. So there we go. So I got all my classes. This is basically what all my adjustments should be looking like across all the accounts. And then this reference number and this date, I just have to copy it across all the lines. So I'm just going to hit paste in this case, right? Or just copy that and then select them all and paste. They all need to have the same reference number and the same date. Okay, so there we go. This is my spreadsheet, which you basically populate with a journal entry based on Excel. Then you click on Process IIF File. Click on Confirm Selection. That's going to save a journal entry into my desktop. I'll click on Save. And then I go into QuickBooks. And I go to File, Utilities, import IIF file, and then I'll click on OK. Click on import for me. I'll fix it later. Import IIF. Select my journal entry from my desktop. Click on open. Okay, and then something happened. Let's take a look at that. Let's go into our reports, company financial profit and loss standard. Let's do this fiscal year, and let's do group by class. There we go. So you can see it here. Oh, and let me collapse the columns, collapse the rows, and there we go. Notice that there's nothing in overhead, so it actually worked. I'm just going to double click here on net income for a second, just so we can pull up that journal entry. Let's open it up here, and let me just minimize that, close that, and look at the profit and loss report again. Okay, so this is the journal entry that we just imported doing my crazy spreadsheet trick and with the macro. And basically what I did is I recreated using Excel what would that journal entry look like in Excel, and then use my macro to create an IIF file to then import it. Now, just kind of to prove you how this works, I'm going to move this journal entry. I'm going to move it up one day. I'm going to move it up to January 1st, and then click on save so you can see what happens in my financial report. So I click on save, hit yes, save, and then notice that all the numbers are back in there, right? Because that journal entry is no longer from the date range of the report that we're using. And I'm going to go back and put that back into December, where it's supposed to be, where we're going to move all this overhead across our classes allocated 35% and 65%. Hit save, save, and there you go. Nothing under overhead and unclassified. All right, I'm actually going to show you what that IIF file that was created with my macro file looks like, because you can actually recreate that file on your own. You actually don't need my macro. I think my macro makes things a lot easier, 100%, but I'm going to show you what that looks like exactly. So I'm going to open up my Excel file here, and I'm going to close Excel completely just to kind of show you. I'm going to open Excel and just have the kind of the new window open, and then I'm going to click and drag that IIF file I saved into my desktop. I think is this one here. Bring the next one in. There we go. That's the one. So let me close this one and maximize. So this is the IIF file that was actually created with my macro, and I'm going to take this exact file and I'm going to copy and paste a link in the description in case you want to download this exact file that I used. Notice that there's a column for account. This is where you can put either the account number, if you're using account numbers, or the account name. You can't put both. So either number or name. But notice I got my account, I got my classes, the 3 classes, I got my amounts, the ones that are sort of moving around there. I got my document number. And also notice that we got the same date and the same document number across all the lines to tell QuickBooks this is all one big journal entry. So if you want to try to modify this file to do it on your own, you're welcome to do so. Or obviously, if you want to download my macro to be able to create that journal entry IIF file, I'll put a link in the description for that as well. So anyway, sorry I went down in this deep end and really advanced in Excel and macro IIF stuff, but I think it's interesting for some people. And if you made it this far, thanks. And make sure you hit like, make sure you add a comment below if this video was useful for you. Subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you on the next one. Thanks.